Hey everyone, it's Lucid, and we are going to be talking about Nidavangr. That's right. We're going to be talking about the new middle-aged nation that got added with Dominion 6. It is super cool. It's got really unique mechanics that no other nation has with these really cool Scar Souls warriors. And it's a very versatile nation. It can be played, I think, Scales or Hellbless. It's got pretty cool troops. It's got non-stealthy troops, stealthy troops, and it's got some really interesting mages, many of which who are shapeshifters. So it's a really kind of cool, unique faction, and looking forward to talking about it with you. I'm going to show you this quick battle here first. This is a handful of the Sacreds, the Nith bed, and they're going up against a very large force of PD. So not exactly the craziest fight. But you can see these guys are not to be messed with. These guys in many ways are a glass cannon. They do a ton of damage, but don't really have super great defenses, except for Scar Souls. Despite that, the defenses are apparently working pretty well. These guys are not dying, even when they're isolated and surrounded. Like this guy here is just face tanking all these PD. And he's doing it with like 7 defense and 14 protection. You know, it's kind of wild. So, yeah. It's a pretty cool faction with pretty cool units, and looking forward to talking about them with you. The high-level overview for this nation is, like I said, they're very flexible. You can play them Scales or you can play them with a Bless. You've got one of the most interesting things about them, too, is that it's a nation that doesn't really require many forts. You can play them with a lot of foreign recruitment. All of the non-cap mages are foreign recruit. So you can get all of your mages just by plopping down a lab and a temple in a province and start spitting these guys out. Really, really strong. It gives you great timings on getting your mage economy scaled up, either for like rushing somebody and using some spells, or for like just getting your research going really fast. One of the things in Dominion 6 is forts take, I think, 1 turn longer than before. So because of that, it slows down the research timings even more. And so you do benefit a lot from not having to put forts up for these guys. As a side benefit, when you're making lots of labs and temples, because all of your mages are sacred, you tend to get pretty high Dominion push. And then if you have high Dominion score, which I think you're probably going to want for this nation, then you're going to have even higher Dominion score from having all the temples out. And it's very easy for Nidavangr to be a true Dominion powerhouse. They can do blood sacrifices. Now, they have very limited access to blood. It's basically just on their cap-only mage. And this is a 500 gold mage that usually are not going to want to have as a blood hunting. But I think you will do that just because some act breaking into blood's very valuable. And potentially by the late game, you can actually use the blood sacrifice and set indie priests to blood sacrificing in places. Anyway, this is like a true Dominion powerhouse. They should be producing tons and tons of Dominion, which is cool. They also have a Dominion effect where they can scry. So they get very accurate military reports of what's inside a province. It's just like a tighter band of ranges when it tells you how big an army is. And I think it tells you even like more things when it lists the army description. And furthermore, any battles that happen inside your Dominion, you should be able to see. So very interesting. What also goes along with the foreign recruit theme of like not needing forts, is that the temples are cheap. So a lot of the foreign recruit nations get cheap temples because if a province gets raided from you, it'll knock your temple down. That feels pretty bad if it was a 600 gold temple. So this makes that strategy a bit more viable. But the side effect of that is that it also makes temples really cheap. So, I mean, you're really looking at like 900 gold for the lab. I think that's the right price for the lab and the temple to get them plopped down and start producing mages for you. So that's really nice. So yeah, you can play them that way, like without forts. You can also build forts. Some of the units you need require forts. So basically, this is the only fort recruit unit aside from your sacred, which is cap only, which by default, the capital, is hopefully always going to have a fort on it unless there's some real salt. But yeah, it's a nation with very kind of reliable mages for the most part. Like the 2 primary mages you get that are any fort, they're always going to get these paths. And these are pretty just generically useful paths. So you can do a lot of different things with them. The cap only mage has some randoms. as does the Apprentice. But for the most part, you know what you're getting. It's not like a bunch of like a grab bag thing with a bunch of randoms. For the most part, like your workhorse mages, you know what you're getting every time. You can put together like reliable raiding parties and kind of do some things. And I think the nice thing about that is if you're a new player, there's not like a tremendous number of spells you need to learn. Like you need to learn nature spells and you need to learn water spells. And then there's some cross path spells to learn as well. So yeah. With that, we're going to go ahead, I think, and move into the unit discussion. And we're going to start by talking about the real flagship unit for Nidavangr, and that is their cap-only sacred. So the reason those guys were tanking in combat is that they were using up a permanent resource they get. The permanent resources per unit, so it's not like they're using up a nationwide resource, but it's this resource called Scar Souls. And we're actually going to read the description for this unit because it's pretty badass and dark. And yeah, so the Nith bathed are ghastly warriors who were not even stopped by death. In a horrible ritual administered by the Seth Berenders, a clan champion is bathed in black water of the Nida. During the ritual, his fellow warriors cut deep wounds in his flesh before taking their own lives. Scarred by both the loss of his friends and the cuts in his flesh, the Nith bathed undergoes a gruesome transformation. His flesh turns white, while his scars and eyes turn black as the night. Each scar on his body represents the strength and death of a friend. If the Nith bathed is killed, one of his scars turns red, and he rises again, unkillable as long as his friend's deaths hold him alive. Being unkillable, the Nith bathed don't care much for shields. Instead, they fight with heavy great swords, able to cut down even the mightiest Jotun. The success of the... I'm not going to be able to say that, is dependent on the might of God and the number of Scar Souls equal to half the Dominion score of the province. Okay. So how does this mechanic work? You get, when this unit is first created, for each individual unit, not like the time you make it first, right? But when each individual unit is created, it's going to get a number of Scar Souls. The number of Scar Souls it gets is dependent on the number of candles in that province. And there's some complexity about candles and like Dom strength, and some of the wording in the game isn't super clear, like calls things different things. Because like if you look at this, it says Dominion strength 10. Right? Like if you look at the bottom of the screen when I hover my mouse over the candles, it says Dominion strength 10. But really, this isn't Dominion strength. I mean, it is. It's the strength of the Dominion and the province. This is local Dominion strength is really the term for it. Or what we call candles. So, yeah. So, local Dominion strength is what gets used to determine how many lives the Nith bid get. Because there's this other thing called Dominion strength here. And here you can see our Dominion strength is only 8. We actually, because of a mod, have it 10 in the province. So the thing that gets used is the actual Dominion strength of the province. So you can actually preach up, if you have a prophet, that prophet in a temple can preach up to Dominion strength 7. So even if you're a sort of low Dom strength build, you can preach up to 7, and then you will get, I think it rounds up for Scar Souls. So with 7, you get, I think, 4 Scar Souls instead of 5. So you should be able to get a lot of Scar Souls on these guys, even if you don't take the, a very high Dominion build. But I think there's good reason you'll want to take high Dominion build. But anyway, so the math is you basically take the number of candles that are in the capital and you divide that by 2, or you multiply it by 50%. If you look at the bottom of the screen, you can see this is Scar Souls 50. So you multiply it by 50% and you get 5, right? So that's how many of these guys get. If you are like 4 Dominion when you're just like starting, these guys are going to get like 4 times 50% equals 2 Scar Souls. So I think, if you look at these guys, they're not going to be amazing often for your very first expansion armies, just because they're usually not what you want to kill indies, like just as a unit type, right? Like they're elite killers and the indies are not elite. The indies are chaff. And furthermore, they're not starting off with a lot of Scar Souls at the beginning because your Dominion isn't high in your capital yet. So I think a good opening And we're kind of going to zip around here talking about different things. But I think a good opening is probably like expanding with a different unit, like a scales unit, not making Nith based until like probably turn 4 or 5, and then using your profit, because you're leading scales units, you don't actually need your profit to wander around with your army. You can use your profit to preach up in your capital and very quickly get the Dominion score there where you need it. And that's also going to help set you up for like a very strong Don push in the early game, so that you have Dominion in all of the provinces you need. So yeah, I think these guys, they do struggle a bit in the very, very early game. You certainly can expand with them, but I think it's probably better to do an expansion party or two with the scales units. A lot of the builds, because you're often going to want like a pretty heavy bless, it's often going, and heavy blesses feel hard to afford in Dominion 6. So because of that, I think there's going to be a lot of dormant bless builds you're going to end up taking for Nidavangr. And with that, you might even wait till like turn 8 or 9 to start recruiting these guys. Now, you want to wait, you want to start producing them before your bless comes online, so that you have a big pile you can go kill people with. But anyway, the exact timing of that, of course, is up to you. But yeah, let's finish talking about them. So they're kind of interesting as a sacred. I think a lot of times with sacreds, you're looking to either patch up like a few weaknesses they have. Like you might have really good protection, but then you don't have resistances. And so it's like, okay, we're really good against like physical damage, but how are we going to do against magic? And you try to patch that up. Or maybe you have some resistances, but you don't have MR or something, you know, like you can look at like what are all the types of things you need to defend against, and which ones of those are weak, and let's bolster those up so that this really durable unit will, you know, be reliable and keep working in most all situations. So you can try to patch the weaknesses. This guy has so many weaknesses. You know, it's got like, okay, we've got pretty good attack, defense, and strength, but like our protection is horrible. We don't even have a hat. These guys are YOLO, right? You know, 8 protection. This is horrible protection. This is horrible. So you're like, okay, well, we need to patch up protection. Okay, let's put on Stygian flesh, or let's put on bark skin. But then it's like, okay, well, but then we have, you know, no resistances either. We just have a little bit of cold. Let's put on fire or shock resistance, right? Well, in Dominion 6, these are expensive blesses. It's not like you casually pick up these resistance blesses. They're pretty pricey now. So, like, patching those up becomes expensive. And then it's like, even with Barkskin, these guys are kind of weak. So it's like, okay, well, you know, we kind of need a bit more defense. Let's put on some more defense. And before you know it, you've basically made it so that, like, this guy's patched up some defenses, but he's not really that great at his, like, what's his job? You know, like, how good is he at doing his job? So I think the other way to build sacreds is you try to lean into the strength. So it's like, okay, what's this guy's job? He's an elite killer. How do we make him better at his job? We add to the attack. Maybe we get him across the field faster so he can, you know, swing his sword more often. Maybe we give him a way to deal with chaff so that he doesn't get bogged down in chaff and can do his job better of killing elites. So we increase the number of attacks, or we, you know, we give him quickness or something so that he can kill chaff twice as fast, which also is going to help him kill elites. You know, he's got pretty high encumbrance, though some of that's the severe. How does that work? I thought cold resistance would get rid of the severe cold penalty. Maybe it does, but it only does it on this guy? No? Huh. Wait, did these guys... That's not in severe cold. I'm actually curious. We'll test that later. I'm kind of wondering why they get the severe cold penalty to encumbrance when they've got cold resistance. But anyway, yeah. So these guys, very cool. I think the other thing I just want to mention is that because they're low resource, they're very high recruitment points. You need, you know, a lot of Dominion score. I mean, you need a lot of recruitment points. We're capped. You can see we are Turmoil 1, and we can only make 6. The 7th one won't be able to come out. So for a Dominion score of 8 starting out, you would... Basically, all your mages are sacred too. So, you know, you're looking at making 7 per turn. For that, you need at least neutral scales for order. So that's something to keep in mind. I don't know if you want to make 9 or 10 of these guys a turn, how much order you need, but you would need some order. So anyway, these guys take a lot of resources. I mean, a lot of recruitment points, but not a lot of resources. So this means you can make a ton of them early. Now, we talked about you sort of might not want to because they're not really that good till you get the Dominion up, and then potentially if you have a Dormant Bless until that comes out. So you might want to start off with a bit of scales expansion. But certainly once you get your Dominion up to like, 5 or 6, you probably want to look at making these. Certainly by the time you get to like 7, you probably want to be slamming these guys out because they're going to be coming out now with 4 Scar Souls. So, you kind of get to decide, but you can make a ton of them. So if you have high Dominion score with these low resources, you can make a lot of them and then roll up into somebody for a first war with like 100 of these guys. It can be pretty spooky. Again, the detracting point from that is you probably don't want them for your first expansion party. Maybe you start getting them for your second. But I don't know. I haven't played these guys in the multiplayer, so my opinion could change. But yeah, so that's basically the thing. There's this unit you can slam. The other thing I think to think about is because you're going to be building a lot of temples, as your Dominion strength goes up, like your Dominion... Okay, I have to talk a little bit more about this. So this number here, the global Dominion strength for your faction, not the number of candles in any province, this is what determines how many sacreds you can recruit a turn. This is when you pick the candles at the beginning, this is what number is getting changed. Every time you get 5 temples, this goes up by 1. So by the time you get 10 temples, which will probably be early mid-game, you'll be able to get 2 more. Now, if you don't take order scales, you're not going to be able to leverage that to get more Nith bathed. And depending on how strong your bless is, that might be fine. Like if you have a really good bless, you might want, this might be something you care about. Like you might actually really want the order 1 or order 2. And I'd have to test and see really whether you need order 1 or order 2 to make like 10 of these guys per turn. My guess, well, we can test real quick. Okay, so here I've got it pulled up with order 1 and Dominion score 10. Because Nidavangr favors Turmoil, it's actually hard to go for more than that. So here you can see we get 1, 2, 3, 4. We get 8 out. The 9th we can't quite afford. So to get the 9th, you probably could get 10. So we're at 10 Dom score with this particular build. Normally you're going to be making like a cap only sacred. So we have 1 Dominion like recruitment point worth of guys we can't get. I think if you were able to get 2, you would be able to do it. But the problem with getting 2 is the nation's capped at 1 unless you take it on a pretender. And there's a couple pretenders that'll give you order. But yeah, they're probably not the pretenders you're going to want to get. So I think you're really looking at the strongest opening would be like order 1 with like, not necessarily strong. You could go Dominion 8, but if you want to go Dominion 10, where you make 9 of these guys a turn, well, first of all, you can't make 9 of these guys a turn unless you go order 2. But if you go Dominion 9, where you make 8 of these guys a turn, I think the way you would do that is you would need to go order 1. Later, you can do Marble Lions in your capital, and that will pop up the... wait, where are we? I thought it was an enchantment. Oh yeah, here it is. Lion Sentinels. You can cast this in your capital. It costs 30 Earth Gems, but it gives you these Lion Sentinels, and it increases order scales by 1. So now we've got order 2. Now we should be able to get the full 9 a turn. Yeah, actually, this only gives you barely 9. So the other thing is if you take death scales, this number will kind of dwindle over time because the recruitment points are based on how many scales you get in your capital. So these are all things to think about for the sacred. But yeah, I mean, this is still a lot of sacreds per turn. Now we're going to look at the other units. So that's basically the very killy glass cannon with this weird, strange, permanent Scar Souls resource that is the Nith bathed. Now, the sacred are the scales units. This is a nation that I think can play full scales. I think this is a really cool nation. It's kind of finesse. Like none of these units, when you look at them, you're like, oh my god, they're going to carry the nation. You just are going to print these out and everything's going to be fine. They all have like sort of catches. So the first one we're going to talk about is the only one you need a fort to make. Everything else is foreign recruit. The Nidavangr, I have no idea how to say this. They are kind of expensive. They've got 14 gold, but they have better than human stats. They've got +1 strength. They've got +2 attack. They've got +3 defense. And they have a hat, unlike the Nith bathed. They don't have a shield, but they have 2 swords. And I think what makes them unique is they might be the only dual-wielding formation fighters in the game. These guys pack 4 to a tile, which means they're very efficient for taking buffs, and this is a nation that does buffs very well. With 4 to a tile, this is 8 attacks per round. That is a lot. That is a whole lot. And if you were able to paint quickness or something on them, that becomes 16 attacks per round. That is a lot. So these guys are very good at things that, like the Nith Bathe, they're not good at, like clearing chaff. So in that way, they actually kind of synergize well, and you'd want to have these mixed in. You have these guys blending all the chaff out of existence, but things that have high protection, these guys are going to struggle against. 16 damage is not going to get through Almish Plate. Or even it's not going to do terribly well against, like Marinese Plate. But these guys are going to chop right through Almish Plate, especially if they get a bit of a strength buff or 2, like Righteous Wrath or something. They'll go right through it and probably one-hit kill Almish units. So having a mix, like these guys to help deal with chaff, and then these guys to help kill elites, that seems like it's a pretty good strategy. Now, they've got ambidextrous, so they actually get the full 12 attack on both of these things. There's a few buffs they really want. These are very killy. They don't have great protection. They're going to be in some ways a bit more resistant than the Nith Bathe to archery, which is something these guys really struggle against. They're not going to care about 10 or 20 archers. But 200 or 300 archers, these guys start really not liking that. Now, these guys do have hats, so they're a bit better against archery, but they no shield. You can try to buff their protection up and stuff. I think these guys really are blenders. Really what you want with these guys is you want them to get in action as quickly as possible and then just be blendering stuff. So things that make them faster, I think actually there's a pretty good case for putting what is the spell? The nature spell here, like Gift of the Hair. There's a big version of this. Here it is, haste. Yeah, 20 area of effect. This is something you can do pretty easily. I think this is totally worth picking up on these guys and spamming out. It's almost probably as good as Wooden Warriors or something if you're fighting into ranged or different things. These guys are pretty fragile but very killy, and you want them in contact with the enemy as fast as possible. The flip side of this is they take buffs really well, so you sort of want them to pause 2 rounds and then sprint into combat. Pausing 2 rounds might be very bad, though, if you're fighting into a ton of archers. So I think that's one of the things that makes this nation interesting to play is there's a lot of things that sound really good. Let's have these guys hold an attack while we buff them up. But under certain circumstances, that could be really rough. But anyway, these guys are super interesting, very cool. They've got pretty much all of the Nidavangr folk have cold resistance, snow move, mountain survival, forest survival, which is going to give them very good mobility. And 14 map move is basically 2 map move in friendly territory with, forests and mountains not causing any problems. That's really nice. So that's another nice thing because you're kind of playing this lightly armored faction here. Next up, we have, let me do it from this screen. It's got them in a different order. Next up, we have the Bear Clan. So the Bear Clan, if you go full scales, you're not going to worry about Nith Bathe at all, which I think you can do. I would love to win a game or something as Nidavangr full scales because I feel like it requires a bit more finesse. But you have a lot of tools, but none of your tools are oh my god, they're so amazing. This is really good. There's a lot of strengths on these guys, but there's also pretty major weaknesses. It's not that none of these things feel brainless at all. Now, the Bear Clan is going to be good at dealing with what the Nidliva are not good at. And that is dealing with really high protection units, cracking little eggs that are Almish soldiers. With Berserk 3, these guys get up to 15 attack and 29 damage. That is a tremendous amount of damage. Of course, the problem here is that because they have sort of weak defenses, not a tremendous amount of hit points, there's a decent chance they get 2-tapped pretty quickly or 1-tapped. So how do you get to use the Berserk? You really do want to think about doing things which you can do on this nation, like doing Growing Fury and just popping Berserk at the start of combat. That's something these guys certainly will appreciate. And they're going to be a lot more killy with that bonus 4 attack that they're getting from the 3 strength from Berserk and the 15 attack. So very strong, but there's some malices. They have bad formation fighter, so you're only fitting 2 of these guys per tile, and they're undisciplined. Talk about hard to buff, right? These are guys that you would love to paint buffs on, like you'd love to put quickness on them. You'd love to do strength of giants. There's a bunch of things you'd like to do, but good luck trying, because it's going to be pretty hard to get buffs painted on these guys with such bad modifiers here. When you hit, you're going to only be hitting 2 at best, and that's going to be hard to do because they're undisciplined. Nevertheless, if you're going for a Scales army, this is your solution to high protection units. If you're fighting some high protection units like thugs or something, you need these mixed in with your army. If you're fighting primarily high protection units like a big horde of All Mights, you probably just have to only make this. This is your unit, So, and that's just what you have to deal with. So you have to use the right tool for the right job, but there's a lot of things where this might not trade very well. So making the right decision in terms of what unit to make, you probably are going to want some of these in most all of your armies. Because they're undisciplined, you're probably going to want them positioned at the back with maybe the disciplined units up front. Okay, so these are the primary Scales units that you're going to make if you're playing a Scales version, and you're probably going to be making a good number of these even if you're going a Sacred version, because you can only make so many Sacreds per turn. Next up, we have the Stealthy Raiders. So none of these guys, even though they kind of looked stealthy, they're not. These guys are. So we have the Wolf Clan Reaver. They have a nice javelin, and they have a shield, believe it or not. We actually have shields on this nation. They are hoarded by the Wolf Clan. Nobody else gets them. And it's a pretty solid basic medium infantry. It's highly mobile, 14 map move with the forest and mountain survival and snow move. Highly mobile, stealthy, and basically, this is good attack. 12 attack, 17 damage. These are solid stats. And then they have all the armor. They've got hats and shields and a Scale Mercurius. Their armor's basically just as good as the other units, which, this is the same armor as these guys, which are pretty expensive. But these guys also have a shield. If you're fighting into masked archers, you're going to need a lot of these, right? Like these dudes are going to get completely mowed, even though they have a bit better protection. I don't know if I mentioned that they have a Scale Mail Hauberk instead of the dinky 10 protection Scale Curious. But yeah, in general, these guys have dinky armor, no shields. They're going to get ruined by archers. If you're fighting into masked archers, you're probably going to need a lot of the Wolf Clan if you're going Scales. That's just how it is. These guys are fine in melee. The javelin's super nice. But I think the nice thing is I think you combo them with the Crow Clan archers, who are basically slightly better than normal precision short bowmen, but they have some armor and they have a short sword. Like they're not horrible in melee, though the defense here is a good bit worse than the Wolf Clan. But I think the way you would script a raiding party is you have maybe like 30 or 40 of these guys shooting, and then you have these guys in front doing javelins. And basically you're going to get a lot of rounds off before these guys run into combat. And then these guys have shields to sort of protect them from the archers. And, they're going to hesitate to delay in melee while they're, throwing their javelins. This is not like a great heavy raiding option, but it's a pretty good stealth raiding option. So I think that's basically what these guys are. Now, how many of these do you want? I think this depends. So the other thing I need to mention about the archers is I think one role for them is to be here with these guys as a good raiding support. I think the other role is one of the things I've just been hammering on is these guys, because if you're fighting Nidavangr, you should think about making indie short bows. Like these guys are very weak to archers. One of the ways to counter enemy archers is to bring more archers of your own and set them onto fire archer. And you can make a ton of these guys. These guys are foreign recruit. You can slam them. So, again, we're getting back to this thing of building the right kind of unit depending on what you're fighting. If you're fighting into masked archers, which your opponent should be thinking about if they're fighting you, then you might also need to be slamming the archer button. And these guys are a great option for that. So, okay. So moving along, we have the Cub Warrior. Now, these are kind of interesting. On one hand, they are horrible. They have the worst stat line of any of your troops by a margin. They've got only 8 defense. They have 5 protection because they can't even be bothered to wear scale cuirasses, which are pretty horrible. They do have good morale, unlike other kind of militia types, but they also are undisciplined. So they do have the skirmisher tag, so at least they don't take the morale hit from being undisciplined. So they're kind of complete garbage. Like, this is by far and away your worst unit. However, they are 3 resources and 2 recruitment points, and they're 4 in recruit. Let me show you what that means. One second, let me conquer a province. Okay, this is just some random province. Look how many of these guys we can get. Oh, wait, why can't we get many? Oh, we're resource constrained. Okay, well, we've got our capital here drawing resources. But like in a forest, in a province that actually has, this only has 26 resources. A lot of provinces you're going to get are going to have like 60, 80 resources, especially like mountains and forests. And there you'll be able to get like 40 units per province. I mean, this is like the worst province basically you can get. And you can get 8 per turn. The way I, by the way, figured that out is if you hold shift down when you click, you get 10 at a time. And so I can see 2 are grayed out, so I know that's 8. But holding shift down to recruit is a good quick tip if you didn't know that. But yeah, so you can get huge amounts of these. Like, let me actually get one of the forests. Okay, so I picked up this forest, and look at this. Like, okay, and this isn't even a particularly great province for it, but this is like more what's normal for just like a decent province of getting Cub Warriors. You can get a lot, like a whole lot of these guys. Consider you might be able to do this on like 4 or 5 provinces on a border. You can be getting like 100 units per turn without a fort. Now, why might you consider getting such a lowly piece of garbage, you might ask? I hope you ask. And the answer is, I think, a couple-fold. One is siege chaff. Second is just like hitting the panic button and you just need bodies. And I think third is that you kind of have a nation that doesn't have a lot of defenses. Like, we're not having a ton of defense. Like, we're not elves with 16, 17 defense. We have 1 unit, which is kind of mediocre with the shield. We have kind of shit armor. One of your defenses is just safety in numbers, right? And I think that applies across the board. And these are a great way to have safety in numbers without like horribly routing, even though because they're very easy to kill, they still will rout, even though they have good morale. But I think there's some value in getting these guys just to bulk up an army so that your, Nith bathed and other more blendery units aren't getting killed. Like, I think a good thing I think if you're fighting into like Ulm or something, it would be worth making as many Bear Clan as you can, but also probably mixing in Cub Warriors just to give your Bear Clan more time to work. Now, obviously, I would rather spend gold on only Bear Clan, but if it's in the early game where you're not really gold constrained, like the number of turns you have matters a lot for like how many units you can put on the field, then yeah, maybe you slam a bunch of Cub Warriors. Yeah, so that's basically their role, is basically being an oh shit button, bulking up armies, or siege chaff. So yeah, those are those guys. We'll talk about the commanders here too. So the commanders are pretty good. We'll talk first about the capital only mage. There's a lot of different things you can do with them. So this is a very high finesse unit. So let me actually go back to the other game. Okay, so I've got the other game pulled up. So this guy, you can change him into a crow, and this crow has stealthy and very high map moves. So you can skedaddle all over the place running around with this guy. He's also very capable of magic phase attacking. So you can put a Starshine Skullcap, and they can all magic phase, or the Air 2s can cloud trapeze. So you've got lots of different options for magic phase movement. We'll talk about the paths. You get Air 1, Astral 2, Death 2, Holy 1 by default. And then you're going to get 2 guaranteed randoms and then 1 small chance. But yeah, so basically what this is going to mean is you're going to have a lot of Air 2s, you're going to have a lot of Astral 3s, and you'll have a lot of Death 3s. You will have a few Air 3s, like maybe a couple the whole game. you'll have maybe a couple Astral 4s the whole game, and you'll have probably a couple Death 4s the whole game. That's sort of how this math works out, because it's a 1 in 16 chance, and they're slow to recruit, right? So it's basically every 32 turns, you'll get a double random. Now, those odds are slightly improved, and indeed, there's a chance to even get like an Astral 5 if you roll this 10% chance and get Astral while you got these other ones. But we're now getting into like very, very small chances. Now, so what do we do with all these paths? Well, there's a lot of things you can do. The first and kind of most obvious thing is these guys are highly mobile, either in crow form or by magic phasing. You can do Skelly spam. That's kind of the most obvious one. The other thing is you have nature water on this nation, so you can make clams of pearls very easily, which means these guys can essentially, for no cost, once you've invested in the clam of pearls, do Power of the Spheres. And it's not like an Astral 1 guy doing Power of the Spheres where it's going to use up all their mana. This guy can just do it, and I'm curious. I'm going to see if it uses both pearls. Okay, so I was just testing it, and yeah, you can see it only used 1 pearl here to do Power of the Spheres and put him at very high fatigue. I think this might be because he's no, he was Astral 2. Yeah. It might change the math and drain Dominion. I don't think there's a way to get it to force it to use the extra gem, which you would want it to do potentially. But yeah, I think if you do this, you probably want to stack a bit more reinvigoration gear, and then you could have them. It basically makes, if you stack a lot of reinvigoration gear, the hit you get from that initial Power of the Spheres is going to be a bit less bad. So yeah, especially if you're doing thugging, like I've got this guy kitted out to do, you're not going to want to do Power of the Spheres. But for the, I'll show you basically 2 ways to do it. Okay, so this is like a basic setup for like a Skelly spam, not basic. This is like a top tier sort of setup for a Skelly spam dude. So the way, this might not work in this particular case, because I'm just going to send him at this province, and like the heavy cav might ruin me. But you basically, we're going to do invulnerability, and then we're going, we'll do Power of the Spheres, because I was talking about it. You can do Power of the Sphere. Oh, I also said we would do, I think we'll do it without this. One second. Okay, so I've changed the gear setup a bit. So we've got a Skull Staff. We got Magic Phase. We'll pretend we're Magic Phase moving this guy. A Direwolf Pelt. This actually is to help in cold, to get him a bit less cold encumbrance. This guy's also super old. He's getting 3 from old age. Yeah, this guy's very old. And then Boots of the Messenger here. It also potentially is worth, you can use your blood to reduce the age of somebody. I forget exactly which spell it is, but let me see if I can find it. So it's this one. You can spend 10 blood slaves and to become 10 years younger. Yeah, I don't know how great that is, but yeah. Anyway, we'll see if this works for the script. Now, this is a lot of gear to risk, but okay, we did Power of the Spheres. You can see it bumped us up to 35 fatigue, but we have a lot of reinvigoration on this guy. We've got 6 reinvigoration, cast invulnerability, and then Horde of Skeleton spam. For whatever reason, he cast Doom as well. So, there you go. But yeah, so that's one way to use them, basically, is a highly mobile Skelly spam raider. You don't need all this gear. I'm just kind of showing you like and this isn't super expensive. These are both 10 gem items, and this is a 10 gem item, so it's pretty expensive. You can obviously do this on a budget. You can do it with a pearl instead of a clam of pearls. You can do it without a Skull Staff. You can do it without most of these things, but I'm just showing you. And obviously you can, get the same amount of Skelly spam by sending more guys, but with fewer gear. The other way to use them is they actually can be like budget thugs. I'll show you that. Okay, so this is another such setup. I think for both of these, the only gear I've forged is stuff the nation can natively make. So we're stacking hit points up a bit. Ideally, you'd probably have this gear on them ahead of time so they would start with it. But yeah, got armor, boots of quickness. You probably could find a better thing here. I think actually, did I make I think a better thing might be Amulet of the Giants, which is this thing. And we'll send this guy in, and the amulet. But yeah, okay, yeah, so now he's got the hit points, so it'll be a bit easier. So this would be like the thug option. And these guys are actually pretty solid thugs against... One of the things you'll notice if you look at these paths, these are all good against mundane attacks, right? Mist Form, Body Ethereal, and Invulnerability, all very good against mundane attacks. The second you're having to fight magic weapons, This guy's in a lot of trouble, though. All right, and you can see he's going to blender all these guys pretty well. So having these guys hypermobile, you magic phase this guy in, right? He kills a bunch of stuff. You change shape. And what's cool about it is these items still stay hidden. I love this change they made in Dominion 6. It's so nice. These disabled slots, so they don't disappear, it makes these shape changers so much more fun to use. And then you can sneak them out. Very, very, very cool unit. So these are just two different ways to use them. The third way, which I'm going to mention, but I'm not going to like show you, is this guy can also be a powerhouse mage in combat, right? So Power of the Spheres, Storm Power on the Air 2 variety, which you'll have tons of Air 2s. Or not tons, but a lot. We're now up to Air 4, right? Now you're going to need to throw up a storm. So now all of a sudden this guy who, it's kind of like, okay, we're middling at best, weak air power. Well, we can, without gear, put up like big high tier battle spells. Like we don't need boosters and stuff to get up that high. To be Air 4. So that's pretty powerful. The other thing, so basically this guy can do big astral, though you're probably going to want a booster because you can get up to Astral 3 really easily. I'm sorry, Astral 4 really easily. But to do Astral 5 stuff, you'd want a booster. I think most of the big battlefield spells you can do with just this. But yeah, so basically this guy can do pretty much all the big death, air, and astral magic very, very easily. So he adds a tremendous amount to your nation just from that perspective. Huge. So that's kind of the other main use. The final use is they can be a communion master. Who would be the communion slaves? Either more of the Crow clan or it's the apprentices. And that's because the apprentices, which I guess we'll talk about next, can get one of 5 different randoms: water, earth, astral, death, and nature. We'll talk about how to use each of them. We'll start with the worst. The worst is probably Death 1. Death 1 can like dark knowledge and cast reanimation strategically. In combat, they're horrible. It's really kind of one of the worst single paths. The next single path we'll talk about is nature. Nature ones are notoriously bad. It's like tribe tier. They can cast point buff protection, which is like bark skin. That's probably their best single, like the best thing they can do. They used to be able to cast swarm, but Illwinter decided that nature ones were too good and took that away from them. So fuck. The nature ones are really bad now. The other thing they can do is they can cast Berserk. They can do Touch of Madness, which can be nice on your Berserkers. But again, we're struggling for uses here. These guys are really bad. Astral one, phenomenal. Can cast Twist Fate, can cast Body Ethereal. Body Ethereal is probably the main use for these guys. Though, they can also be Communion Slaves, and that's actually pretty sick. Earth ones, also bad in general. However, on this nation, they're kind of good because we only have one other mage that has an earth path, and they're expensive, and they get the same level of earth, these guys. So, if you're trying to do earth magic, you might as well use the cheapest guy that can do it, and they're sacred, right? So you still are going to get the benefit of whatever your bless is. So, yeah, you can put earth boots on these guys, and now all of a sudden, they're earth 2. And then they can do summon earth power, and then they're earth 3. So I think the way to look at it is these guys are your little lab forgers doing earth things, the earth ones. Or you put earth boots on them, and then you use them in combat to do earth stuff. And I think they're good at that. So that's a pretty cool use. Now you can, in a pinch, throw one earth gem on them and have them cast summon earth power with the gem, and then they can do earth 2 things, but not earth 3 things. The earth 3 things they could do with extra gems potentially. So that's kind of like using these guys in a pinch. They're not great, but I think these are actually very usable for your nation. Like they're an important part, the earth ones. The water ones, they kind of suck. The nice thing about water is you can do water bracelets, get them up to water 2, but you have such better water mages, But they can all do Frozen Heart. So they're better. I would say like the tier list for these guys is the Astral is by far and away the best. The water is probably the next best. The earth is the best after that, and then nature, and then death. The thing that's important about these guys, though, is their cost. They're 75 gold, and they're sacred. That's very cheap. Now, they have a research malice, But if you go high magic scales, then these guys research very efficiently. If in Magic 3, which you can get with a certain pretender, they're by far and away your best researcher. By far and away, when you look at like upkeep cost and things like that. And you can make these guys with just a 900 gold investment and a lab and a temple. And yeah, you can have really, really good, fast-growing research with these. And a lot of them are useful in a pinch. You know, like the nature ones can roll out and they can do protection with your army in like a rush situation or barkskin. You know, the astral ones, hugely good. You know, the water ones, probably less good. The water and earth ones, you're probably only going to use like defensively or unless you put gear on them. Because like the water ones with a bracelet can do quickness. The earth ones with earth boots can do earth power and things. So, you know, but like you wouldn't really use these, I don't think, so much for a rush. These maybe if you're going into elves to do like earth grip or something, but in general, no. So these guys are very, very good researching. In Magic 3, they're going to research for 8, which is a great return. In Drain, forget about it. These guys are horrible. Like in Drain 2, these guys are going to be 3 research. That's like almost nothing. You might as well not get them. So basically the way I think it works for research is if you go Magic, you probably want to make a lot of these guys. Not only them, but a lot. If you go Drain, you're going to want to make your other 2 National Recruit Anywhere mages. And we'll talk about them next. One of them is the Wolf Clan. And the Wolf Clan's really cool. I'll show you if we can grab one of them here. You change shape and they turn into a wolf. So again, highly mobile and stealthy. Very cool. Nice for skedaddling out of a place when you need to kind of get the hell out. So yeah, very interesting. They get Water 2, Nature 1. And what this is basically going to be useful for is a couple things. In the early game, it's going to be point buffing quickness and casting Wave Warriors. These are the main things you're probably going to want to do with the water ones. So it's like a pretty simple recipe. The other thing that you can do in the early game is point buffing Moss Body. Moss Body got nerfed in Dominion 6. It's not as good on super combatants because there's a flat chance for it to just break instead of it having to have like a damage threshold, which is going to be overcome. So it's just, you know, it's that flat chance to break. And yeah, that flat chance, it still is very good on troops where you're planning on tanking like 40 hits, but it's not as good on super combatants where you're planning on taking 400 hits. So, but yeah, these guys are still good at painting Moss Body, a very good buff on a lot of your troops. But those are the main jobs. Technically, these guys with 2 boosters can do Foul Vapors, but that's going to be very hard for you to manage. So yeah, I think that's the main thing. Later in the game, these guys can be Water 3 with that bracelet. So that's pretty nice. And then they can do even more water stuff. One thing you want to be thinking about with this nation is doing Grip of Winter, because all your guys have cold resistance and you have cold dominion and you have a lot of dominion push. So that's a good spell to have in your back pocket. And these guys, I believe, can do that. Let's check on the requirements for that again. Yeah, you need to be Water 3 with 3 water gems. So that is accomplishable by these guys with a water bracelet. So this is definitely something you can spam out and have in a ton of fights. Grip of Winter, very good spell. So yeah, that's these guys. The next up is the Bear, and the Bear clan are pretty interesting. Do I have any here? For whatever reason, I don't see a Bear clan. I'll get one here and show it to you. So this is a Bear clan guy. They shape change into a Great Bear. This is a big honky guy. He's got 44 hit points. These are great basic thug paths. Probably if you're going to have a 3-path mage, these are probably the best basic thug paths to get. You can thug with this guy in the human form and he'll turn to the bear form if things go sideways. In that case, you're going to want to put armor on. That's basically the reason to start in the human form, is to do armor. If you don't have armor, if you're going to do like naked thugging, you can do that, but you're going to want to start in the bear form probably, because you'll get switched to it and get afflictions. It's better to just get the natural protection buff, get the HP buff, and then you can do things like the basic script for these guys is you're going to want to do enlarge, you're going to want to do iron skin, you're going to want to do temper flesh, you're going to want to do personal regen, and then the last one you can pick kind of whatever you want. I probably wouldn't pick anything because you're going to need the fatigue. I think if you do this, you also need a fatigue reduction thing here. Like you're going to want, do we have it? You're going to want basically one of these belts of giant strength here. Yeah, we'll actually try it. We'll use this guy to thug. Okay, so this is the gear I put on: a belt of giant strength and a ring of regen. This is probably about what you would need to make thugging on this guy work as a solo operator. Obviously, it would be better if, you know, if he was full kitted in human form, and the gear doesn't die if he switches to bear form. So you get to keep it. That's probably the better way to do it. But I'm going to take this over by Ashdod real quick. Okay, let's see how this goes. This doesn't always work. But personal iron skin and large personal regen. So this guy's pretty tough. You can see he's got pretty high fatigue. That's why it's important to put some of this gear on him. This will keep him fatigue neutral, so at least he won't fatigue out. But you can also spend a gem. I had an empty slot. If you do summon earth power as your first script, he's going to have a lot less fatigue, and that's going to dramatically reduce the incoming damage. And that also will free up this slot. So we're probably going to die here. I think we're getting repelled. Oh, we're routing. Because I was like, why aren't these guys getting killed? And I'm pretty sure, yeah, the attack was getting repelled. So you probably actually you kind of need a way for this guy to go berserk. And that way it might be better if you had like a flesh eater on them, and then they do switch form to the bear, and that way you still get the berserk proc. Because yeah, these guys are getting the shit repelled out of them. What can happen too is, we'll do this again, but what will happen is they get harassed, and when they're harassed down, the repel really ends up screwing them. So, yeah. Okay, so we'll see if we fix it here. The problem is the flesh eater is going to give them a bit more fatigue reduction, so we won't be fatigue neutral. So in this case, we're going to change the script a bit. We're going to do summon earth power first. And this is going to give us less fatigue. It's also going to make it so we're fatigue negative. So the berserk isn't going to ruin us. And then we're going to do personal iron skin, temper flesh, personal regen, and then enlarge. Then attack closest. And something like this is going to get us a lot more mileage out of these guys, I think. He's basically going to almost instantly turn into a bear and then go ham and kill everybody, is what I'm expecting. Okay, so now he's in the bear. This is like his true form. And he kept berserk. But it's interesting now. I didn't realize this. Oh, so actually we wouldn't need to have done earth power. I thought the berserk would stay. This actually is really cool. I didn't realize how this worked. But so if you look at him now, he's berserker 3. Right? Okay, so he's gone berserk now. So now that he's berserk, he got this bonus to natural protection. But he's also getting, it doesn't show up here as a fatigue mouse, but he's losing 3 fatigue a turn from berserk. But now, once he's gone into this, he's gone berserk 0. So he's not getting a bonus to natural protection anymore. And he's not getting the fatigue hit, because it's muted this item. So basically he loses this berserker 3. Really interesting how that works, but I kept the gone berserk, which makes sense. I think this is a pretty intuitive way. Like, I don't think there's a bug. This makes a lot of sense how they've done it. But I didn't realize it would work this way. But yeah, now he should just kind of blender things, because he's got not very much fatigue. He's not going to get repelled, so you can see these guys are dying. Because you can sit here and tank these guys all day, but you really need a way to get them to go away. And you can see we did that. So anyway, that's kind of how to make this work. But a cool use of these guys. Now, the main way you're going to use them isn't going to be that. Probably the main way to use them is you want to put thistle maces on these guys. And with the thistle mace, these guys are really good. So let's just look at how we would like script them. As part of an army, you're going to do Strength of Gaia, which is just going to make these guys really beefy. This is a really good buff to have on them. And because they're going to turn into a bear in their second form, just casting this, which is like what you want to do in an army fight anyway, just casting this is going to make them very tanky in bear form. But you're not casting it to thug, you're casting this to be a big combat mage. So now we're up to nature 4. So you can see we're now like a nature powerhouse, right? We can do these big spells, which are normally like kind of hard to cast. We can just cast them very casually. Oaken Army, not a big deal, right? We're nature 4 all day, right? I mean, you can have this guy with, you know, you do a cornucopia. If you've got my temp gem item on, you can make some of the other, like the fairy in a jar, some of the other things, and have this guy casting battlefield-wide spells all day long. But yeah, basically the way to use this guy, I think, and it, you know, to really strengthen your nation is you're going to be bringing them with big groups of guys, and you're going to be casting all the big nature spells you want to. Army of Giants, very good. This is going to lean into kind of the strengths of your troops, increase the killiness, right? You tend to have pretty good base HP. This is going to make it even better. So Army of Giants, very good. Army of Rats, also very good. Cast this on your enemy, make them suck. Oaken Army, you're probably going to want to cast this. I think another combo to think about is Oaken Army is going to give you a fire weakness. You probably are going to want to get rid of that. Fortunately, as you run up Alteration, which is where all those good nature spells are, you're also going to get the ability to cast Warriors of Niflheim. Or Frostflesh Army, sorry. So this you need to be water 3 to cast, which again we can do, right? Water Bracelet makes us water 3. So we can now, just with our Recruit Anywhere guys, we can do Oaken Army, giving everybody bark skin, and we can give everybody fire resistance to counteract the bad part of that. And in a pinch, you know, bark skin's not helping a ton. So in a pinch, if somebody's going to be doing a lot of fire magic, you can, you know, skip the Oaken Army and just accept the fire resistance. So yeah, that's more of the spells this guy can cast. You know, it's Army of Giants. I'll just make a list here. Army of Giants, Army of Rats, Oaken Army. These are all spells easily castable. This one's a little tricky. You do have to be nature 4, but we can get, like I said, we get there very easily with this guy to do Army Regeneration. Any other big spells here? Serpent's Blessing, obviously a big one. Yeah, I think that's basically it. So yeah, this guy's going to be doing all of your big nature magic. Yeah, so I think we've talked this nation to death now. We've gone through all the units. They're really good. I mentioned the big things these guys can do. The small things they can do are basically those spells I was mentioning, but, you know, not at scale for the whole army. There's point buffs versions for basically all of those. There's a final unit we have to talk about, I realize we missed, and that is the Nida here. And this is the capital-only commander version of your Nith Bathed. And the difference is, instead of having Scar Soul 50, this guy gets Scar Soul 100. So this guy, if you're in Dom 10, gets 10 extra lives. That's a lot. I want you to expand your brain to think about these guys a bit differently. Imagine these guys... Okay, this is a... So, like, if you look at the Shuten Doji in Shiniyama, it's one of the few units without, like, good magic paths that is actually really interesting as a thug, like as a solo commander. It's one of the things I wish Dominions did better more often, was having really cool commanders that don't only require magic paths. This is one such guy because he gets all these cool Scar Souls. So I think it makes sense to try to do really cool things with them. Well, I'll set up a cool thing just to show you. One thing I will say as I'm setting this up is I do wish these guys were 1 commander point. 2 commander points feels rough. It feels... you know, there's like priests often are 1 commander point. Commanders are often 1 commander point. This guy's really good. He's kind of worth 2 commander points. It just feels really bad. It would feel a lot better recruiting these guys if you were getting 2 per turn. I don't know how strong this nation is. I think if this nation needed a small buff, the first thing in line, I think, for a really cool thematic buff would be letting you get 2 of these guys per turn. That would be really cool. It would feel really good. It probably wouldn't strengthen the nation too much. But I think it would feel really cool. Now, the thing we're going to do with them is we're going to take 3 of them. And we're going to potentially send them over here. I'm going to put gear on them. Now, the kind of gear we're going to put on is actually very, very basic. We're going to give them big honking swords like this. You can do anything for the swords, like great swords of sharpness. I think wraith swords are kind of cool and thematic. They hit really hard. They're going to steal life and regenerate. Ideally, you'd put armor and stuff on them, but I think kind of the idea of this is like doing something ultra budget. So I think what we're going to get is we're going to get a couple more items that are just going to slightly stack their defense up. And we're going to counteract some of the malices because we're going to put iron skin on them. And I'm going to base it. You can use these guys however you want. I'm not going to tell you how you should or shouldn't use them. But we're going to use them basically to snipe. I think the way you would probably want to use them is in an army. You have them on hold and attack rear like this. We'll see how it works. I don't know how it would work against this throne army we're going to hit, but basically you would sort of try to use it against a player army. And here, let me have you change shape. We're going to basically take these guys. Wait, didn't I have a... Oh, this guy. We'll have this guy come join. And we'll have these guys come join. And yeah, so we're basically going to point buff the crap out of these. Now, I think these guys are 16. They should draw point buff aggro. So what we're basically going to do here is we're going to do body ethereal. I'm not totally sure. Point buff aggro seems to have changed a bit. So we'll see how it actually works. Oh, wait, fuck. I got to use a different guy. Now, you could also load the point buffers up with like rings of returning and stuff so they get out safely. But we're just going to have them do a few buffs and retreat. So we're going to have this guy do Mist Form, Mist Form. This will hit both tiles. And then that way, Mist Form is like a very good buff just to hit like a couple things. So Mist Form, Mist Form. How much was this? 20 fatigue. Nice. Body Ethereal. And I think we're going to do Body Ethereal twice and then retreat. Oh, no, I need to do Flight. Let's see if we can do that. I think we're going to do Gift of Flight twice to make sure we hit the right tile. And I probably will have this guy actually change shape. I probably can do this. Wait, did he not? Okay, I'm going to pause and I'll just show you when I'm done. Okay, so this is going to be the script for this guy. Mist Form, Body Ethereal, Gift of Flight. And I think this guy will be the only non-flyer at the left on the battle by the time that's happening. And then for these guys, I'll show you the script. Okay, so I've got this set up. I have no idea how... I mean, this probably won't work, you know, just to be super clear. But I'm not showing it to you because I think this is what would be good to clear out a throne, but just I need some enemy to hit. And yeah, this is a kind of cool... Oh, I was going to put the Storm Spools on these guys too. I mean, you could obviously kick these guys... Clearly they want armor probably more than they want this miscellaneous gear I'm putting on them. But I don't know. This is what I felt like building. So anyway, we've got this. Let's see how this goes. The spells are basically Enlarge, Iron Skin, Regeneration, Gift of Hair, and then Quickness, Gift of Formlessness, Moss Body, Lesser Winter Reward, and then these... Everybody's retreating that's not one of these guys. Now, and the way I want you to imagine this is imagine this is an army fight, and these guys are jumping in on either the 4th or 5th turn to the back lines to chop up enemy troops. By the way, you can also give them 2 weapons instead of 1. So you could give them like Flesh Eater and something else, since you have some minor blood access. I think it looks like, yeah, these guys got enlarged. So the buff aggro seems to be mostly working. I don't know if they've gotten hit with Flight yet. They did. Okay, so this is how I would use them in multiplayer, and hopefully they end up coming back here and just destroying things. And I don't know if they're going to lose any Scar Souls here. Yeah, probably not. I mean, these guys are going to be fucking monsters. They're going to be so hard to kill. It's crazy. And the thing is even if they don't kill your intended target, just with that number of Scar Souls and then the buffs on them, they're just going to be such a fucking pain in the ass to deal with. So anyway, they did kill this, but that's how that works. So I think these are super interesting thugs. I think they're like Shootin' Doji tier of being like having interesting stats on them that make them interesting to use as thugs without having magic paths. So I think that's very cool. I like that. But yeah, so we've basically been through all the things in the nation. The other thing I'll just mention, because we didn't talk about spells, Summon Doors of the Four Directions. If you get all 4 of these, then you put up Darkness and Perpetual Storm. And it's not like a global slot. They have to like kill one of your dwarves. The thing is this is probably going to zing you at least as much as it's going to zing other people. So I think it's good in potentially the very late game if you think you and the person who else is like running, like vying for victory, if it's going to be worse for them than it will be for you. Like if it's a flying nation or something, it might be good to put up Perpetual Storm, or who knows. But like you're not particularly well suited to deal with darkness just in general, unless you take it in your bless. And even then, like your scales units aren't. You do have the ability to summon skeletons and stuff. So I think it depends. But like in general, this is not a go-to. This is not something I would like ever beeline towards, because in all likelihood, this will hurt you worse than it hurts them. Like, you probably are a nation that wants to cast Mass Flight and get your melee guys into action, like fighting people, you know? But, you know, maybe in whatever particular matchup in your game, this is really good. So it's nice to have. It's nice to be able to do. It's very expensive. It costs, you know, almost 300. What is it? Yeah, no, it's 240 air gems. That's a lot. So it's expensive, but potentially worth it. The dwarves you get are also really good. They're Air 4s and like Earth 3s to start with, and then they have other paths. So it's worth getting 3 just to get the dwarves. The 4th one I would only put up if you think it strictly advantages you and you think you can win the game off of it, because it's probably going to piss other people off. They're not going to be able to recruit anything new, and they're going to hate you. So I wouldn't put up the 4th dwarf unless you're ready to fight the world and you think that's going to help you do it. So yeah. With that, we'll do a pretender design in the next episode. I might play these guys single player. They're kind of fun, but we'll see. I don't really have time to do a multiplayer game right now. So yeah, we'll see you guys next time. And until then, take care.